So I like to start the conversation, since we ground this in the concept of well-being. And so my first kickoff question is, what does health and well-being mean to you?
Well, to me, health and well-being, I think most people think of your physical health first, which of course is a very big part of it. But it's really, to me, it's a whole package. It's mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and that doesn't necessarily mean religious based, because everything is connected. And kind of how you were talking about before, being connected with people and connected with animals, everything's connected. So if one area of your life is suffering a little bit of a setback, the other ones are as well. We might not always see it, or it might not be as dramatic as one of the areas, but they're all connected. And conversely, when things are going well, in one part of your life, there could be little blips on some of the other ones, but it's kind of like one of them drives the train for the whole circle of all of them. So it's really a whole mental, emotional, spiritual wellness type package. That's
It's
the way
all
to say it.
packaged.
It's all packaged.
It's all packaged. Yeah. And you've got a lot of health coaches on this call. So.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I see that.
So you're speaking to the choir.
Right.
Choir. So a lot of what the theme of this conversation is landing on your feet. So, and we talk about, life having all kinds of setbacks, whether they be personal, professional, emotional. And, we're coming at this from your story, and I set it up a little bit in the intro, but can you tell us a little bit about your story, starting with where you are now, like literally in San Francisco,
yeah,
and maybe how you got there and how the story of setbacks and resilience has come into play for you?
Yeah. So I'm in San Francisco right now. I used to live here years ago for 10 years before I moved to Kansas City, where I know Jill from, where I lived there for almost 20 years. And I lived in California 30 years and other places. But I am a digital nomad. That was my 15-year dream when my kids were little, that after I got them off to college, that originally the plan was I was going to move out of the country because I'd always wanted to live out of the United States. And the only thing I knew when I had this plan 15 years before was that I was going to move to a Spanish speaking country because that's my second language. But I knew that as a travel writer, I would visit a lot more places, and I'd narrow it down when it got a little bit closer. So you blink and you got 12 years left. You blink, you got 10 years left. Blink, 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 blink. I'm at 6. Blink, I get to 4 years. And that's when my oldest was graduating from high school. And he went off to Vanderbilt. And at the 4-year mark, I started thinking, well, and part of the reason for moving out of the country not only was because I always wanted to live abroad, but you can have a better standard of living at a lot less money in a lot of places in the world than the United States. So when I got to the 4-year mark, I started thinking, well, instead of me trying to narrow down one place, and even if I would be, because I'd still be working, I wouldn't be retired, but even if I was living on, a lot less than what I would need for my standard living in the States and everything, I still want to travel the world. I always tell people my list of places I've been is like this. The list of places I want to go is like this. And so I started thinking, well, that's going to kind of cut into my travel budget. So why don't I sell everything and just travel full time, since my laptop is my desk, and then just see how it goes. So I sold the house in Kansas City. My kids are 2 years apart, so the older one left. We moved into a 2-bedroom apartment, still in his same school district, so he could finish up. And then August 24th, 2019, I dropped him off at Kansas State, and I've been on the road ever since. So where I go is a combination of where I'm doing speaking, where I'm doing a workshop, where I'm doing a book talk, where I'm doing a travel writing piece, where I'm visiting friends and family, or somewhere I just want to go. And I go back to Kansas City about every 6 months, change out the clothes and everything in my storage room, and then head off again. So I'm in San Francisco Bay Area now for about 6 months or so. And so that's got to where I am now. But how it even got to here was in between. There was a big life crash. And like Jill said in my introduction, it led to my book. But it's not the story of the book. It's the story of what was in it for me that would reveal my true, authentic self. And as you can tell, I'm an extrovert. I talk to everybody everywhere I go. I could go somewhere and there's 500 people and I know nobody, and I'm perfectly comfortable as if I know everybody. And even, and the coaches in the group can attest to this, even when you have done work on yourself and you've gone to counseling and you've done different things to improve whatever your story is, or old childhood things, there's always little pieces in there that need to be healed. And what I learned is that they come up at the time that they're ready to be healed. So the short version is, about 6 years ago, I had a period of time where, in a 6-month period of time, everything in my life went to pot. One thing after the next, after the next, after the next. Relationship that I thought was a lifetime relationship left out of the blue. Financial problems, bankruptcy, the beginning of empty nester grief. I mean, just all these things, pick it, and all in a row, and in a row, and in a row. And unfortunately for me, even though I had very strong family structure, very strong spiritual community where I went to church at Kansas City at the time, you know how it is when you have a dark period in your life. All you can see is the tunnel in front of you, and you forget all those other tools you have, all the people around you. And for me, it got so bad that I was planning on committing suicide. And I never in a million years would have thought that I would ever contemplate that. I know people who have done it. And I always remember thinking, oh my gosh, couldn't they have reached out to somebody? Couldn't they have told somebody something? But getting to that point, I see now why, you're so far past what we would call rational thinking, that you just think that the pain is too great for you to stay and everybody would be better off without you. And the only reason why I didn't do it is because, like I said, I have the 2 kids and I knew what that would look like for them. So it took digging into, even like I said, I had been to counseling and things like that for years before. It took going into, digging into really what was going on way down in the program. And it was old childhood stories, feelings of low self-worth, thinking you're not good enough, you're a failure. If anyone sees the cracks in the armor, they're not going to love you anymore. All of it. But the good thing is, kind of like Christina said, when you go from rising from the ashes to the phoenix, is everybody has a what happened story. There's not a person on the planet that doesn't have a what happened story. The deal is, what are you going to do with it? Because nothing, I believe, happens to you. It happens through you, and it happens for you. And if you're able to look at it that way, then you have something to build upon to move further in your life.
That's a heavy lift. That's a heavy lift.
Yeah.
Because when you're in it, it all feels like it's happening to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, and I know people, I've heard people say, don't tell me there's a lesson in this. I don't want to hear there's a lesson in this. This hurts too much.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a real rejection of that concept too, right?
Right. Absolutely.
So, what is some of the fertile ground? What are some of the fertile ground? So I titled this, setback or something about, what did I title this? Landing on your feet, fertile ground from setbacks. Like what was the fertile ground for you? What were things that caused some lessons and some insights to blossom? Mm-hmm. Sharing.
Well, definitely. I realized through all of that, and going back to counseling after this was all hitting the fan, was that I never was really vulnerable completely in my life. Part of that is a family story. There was, there was no sharing of emotions in my house. So it's, if you even tried that, it was just keep it moving. No disrespect to my parents, but that's just the way it was. That's just the way they were. And so when you, and then I had one parent who was narcissist. You couldn't do anything right. called you names, called you like, I mean, there's a whole thing there. Again, I don't want to disparage, I'm just telling you what the background is, but we are all swimming in that type of thing, whether it's in our household or whether it's when we turn on the TV, because all we see is you need to drive this car, you need to live in this house, you need to weigh this much, you need to make this much money, you need to wear these type of clothes. And even if you are very self-aware and don't subscribe to that, this is the society that we're swimming in constantly. And so if you're not really aware of it and really self-reflective on it, that stuff takes root. So the life coach I ended up working with after recognized that way down in the program there, that I was not really raw and vulnerable with myself. And that all these things that she says, we are adults walking around in 5-year-old bodies, basically. And we have our shield up and we don't want to show people certain parts of ourselves. But she said, being your raw and authentic self gives other people permission to do it as well. And since I was so far gone off the scale at that point, you know, and had a complete major breakdown, and I'm talking about in front of everybody, not one person said, oh my gosh, well, what's with her? You know, she's the one that you look to, she's the strong person, this, that, and everything. That's what resonated more with people, and more people can't, you know, I never felt so loved in my entire life when I had nothing left. What I felt was nothing left. And that's the thing that I should have been all along.
So that when we were talking, I asked you a question about like, what is your, you know, innate strength? Like, what is it within you inherently, you know, underneath all of everything and all the help that you got and the support that you finally found? But there was something that is central to who you are, that's always been there, that was able to come out right in that moment. And you talked about that being that sensitivity and vulnerability as being your strength.
Right. I was always the black sheep in the family as far as emotions. Why do you cry all the time? Why are you so sensitive? And I didn't realize until I was in my 50s that's I'm an empath. I didn't even know what that term meant. Oh, she's been watching Oprah again. You know, every time I showed any kind of emotion, that's what I was saying. Right? So in my old story, I'm internalizing all of that. But that's the thing that I've realized, that's the thing that resonates with people, that I am empathetic, that I am compassionate, that I naturally, it hurts me when other people are hurting, even if I don't know them. You know, I could see something on the news and I'm not devastated, but I feel it. Right. And so that's something that was always there. And I was always put down for it. So it never got to blossom and develop like it could have, but it's out there now.
It's all out for everyone to see.
It's all out there now.
So you go out on the speaking circuit, you talk to people at churches and other organizations, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, when you talk to people, what are some of the common themes you find in other people's stories that they share with you in terms of their growth coming back from setbacks? Like, what do you hear in terms of other people's superpowers?
I think when people are at their lowest and they have things that just totally pull the rug out from under them, and you know, hitting the brick wall type thing, getting hit by a Mack truck, however you want to see it. Of course, we always have our grieving time and our adjustment time and all of that. And there's nothing wrong with that, because sometimes we need that space. But it's always, they discovered a strength they had that they never knew they had. Or they say, I never knew that would happen to me, or never knew I could survive, you know, XYZ. And that's whether it's somebody passed away, or an illness, or a job loss, or, you know, there's a fire and they lose everything in fire. No matter what it is, people find that they had more strength and resilience than they thought. And that there were so many people who they may not have thought of also, who will show up for them if given the opportunity. So we're trying to hide, you know, we don't want anybody to know a bankruptcy is coming. We don't want anybody to know this, that, and the next thing. And there are people waiting to hold that for you. You know, and people who've experienced that maybe you didn't know that. But as soon as you're raw and vulnerable with yourself, other people were like, oh my gosh, me too. And then you have more ways to connect, you know, because it's a shared connection that we have all over the world
Because we're not alone.
because we're not alone. We think we are, but we're not.